Welcome to the Finding Wisdom Show. I am Al Perna, your host for this evening. Today, sitting next to me, we have Etienne Ordono. He's coming for New York State Assembly, District 38. Welcome.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate you having me on the show. And despite our many rehearsals before, it's actually Etienne David Adorno, but that's
Etienne.
okay. That's all right. I have an eccentric mother. She blessed me with this wonderful French name that I've had trouble with for so many years.
It's very interesting because I can't even spell it
Well,
say it.
Well, at least you didn't say ATM machine like many of the kids did when I was a young boy growing up. A lot of them call me ATM machine, AT&T. I mean,
AT&T.
the list goes on.
Well, tell me about yourself today.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Etienne David Adorno. You can call me David. It's a lot easier. Most people do call me David. I'm 28 years old, about to be actually this September. I'm a candidate for the New York State Assembly of the 38th District, which includes 5 different neighborhoods: Woodhaven, Richmond Hill, Ridgewood, Glendale, and Ozone Park. And I've been living in the Woodhaven community for about 25 years. And I'm a member of Community Board 9, the 102 Precinct Community Council, the Woodhaven Block Association, the Richmond Hill Block Association, and I'm also an invested member of my community. As I mentioned before, I've been living there for about 25 years. And I mean, there's not a corner of my neighborhood that I go to that someone doesn't know who I am.
Well, that's a good thing. What school did you attend?
Well, since I've been living in Woodhaven for pretty much all my life, I went to grade school there. I went from kindergarten to 6th grade in PS 60, back when Ms. Sharback was the principal. And those of you out there who know who Ms. Sharback is, I'm sure you're laughing at home. Then I went to junior high school 210 from grades 7 and 8, back when Mr. Braun was the principal. And then from there, I had wanted to be a veterinarian. Believe it or not, Al.
And you ended up going into politics.
Right. I have a way with animals. I still do. I actually have a cat and 2 dogs at home. The cat found me. Don't ask me how. She followed me across the street to my car as a kitten, all beat up and everything, so I took her in.
That's a good thing.
But I went to John Bowne to pursue veterinarian science. They have one of the best agriculture programs in the state.
I went to John Bowne.
Did you? So you know about the 3.2-acre farmland they have in the back, the chicken coop, the goat house.
I know all about it.
Yeah. So, you know, but it was a learning experience for me because after going there for 4 years, I realized that, you know, I didn't want to be a vet. I don't think I could see myself cutting an animal open to help them, even though it would be the best thing for them. I just didn't see myself dealing with blood and everything else in that respect. So I figured, you know what, the next thing that I was really interested in was law enforcement. So I said, well, John Jay College has a great law enforcement program. At the time, they still had an associate's degree program in police studies, so I figured, you know what, let me go there. So I did. I went to John Jay, got accepted the first time around, got my associate's degree in police studies, and during the course of those 2 years, I realized that I had a real passion for law, because you have to take law classes when you study this.
Right, to become a cop.
Right, to become a police officer. So I was getting A's in all these classes, and it was something that it wasn't even that difficult for me. It was like a breeze, so to speak, and it came naturally. So one of my professors, Eugene O'Donnell, who I actually had taken later on in that school year, he told me, he said, you know, Etienne, you really do well in my legal studies class. I think you should really think about pursuing a career in law. Now, at the time, I didn't really think about being an attorney. My goals were a little bit more short-term. But then after looking at my grades, after looking at what I'm really passionate about, I mean, not everybody picks up the New York State Penal Code and reads it before going to bed at night.
Right.
That's what I did. You know, I would look things up just to see.
That was your book to go to bed.
That was my book to go to bed. I would read criminal procedure law. I would read about the penal code, how it changed and everything else. So I decided to pursue a bachelor's in criminal justice, and I did, and I got it with a concentration in law and due process. And all my classes that I took in law, I was, like I said, a straight A student, without even trying.
So you sound like a very intelligent person.
I try.
So, well, what made you go this part?
Well, it's a funny story, actually. After graduating John Jay in 2008, I wanted to go into law, as I mentioned, so I applied to CUNY Law School, which has one of the best criminal defense clinics in the state, if not the country.
In the country.
And in the country. So look at that. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do criminal defense. So I applied to CUNY Law School. Now, as you know, in 2008, we were facing the downturn of the economy.
Yes.
We were in a severe recession. So a lot of people were unemployed. So instead of trying to find jobs, which weren't available, they decided to apply to school and further their education. A lot of them graduate schools, doctorates, and law school.
Law school.
So now the minimum to get into CUNY Law was a 146 on the LSAT. I got a 149. Now, a lot more people, because they were applying, had a lot higher LSAT scores. They had 155s, 160s. So now my 149 seemed like a 130.
Right.
So it wasn't enough to get me in. So I didn't get accepted. So, you know, I was really distraught about that. And I remember having a conversation with my mother, actually. And she told me, she said, you know, you need to expand your resume. And you need to really get more things that are related to the law on your resume. Up until then, my jobs were managing a real estate agency, you know, working at UPS. I worked even at Victoria's Secret for 1.5 years. I'll tell you that another day. But the point is,
you got to be the stock boy.
well, believe it or not, I started as a stock boy,
Right.
and then my manager, Julie, and if she's watching now, I'm sure she's laughing. She said, you know, Dave, you have a really nice demeanor about you. You're an attractive guy. Let's try you out in sales and see what happens. I think you can get a lot of sales out there. So I went to sales. I started in pink, and I was selling women, you know, undergarments, and it went really
Wow.
well. And I would make the quota. We had a 2-hour quota. Every 2 hours, you had to make a certain amount of money in sales, and I would make it in about an hour. So then I went to the beauty section where the lotions were, the perfumes.
Yep.
The only thing I didn't deal with was the makeup bar. And I would sell the quota out in less than an hour. I mean, I was doing really well. I would give women hand massages, show them what creams were the best, the body mists and everything else.
Very
and,
good.
you know, I took into that. So
Let's go off the subject with Victoria's Secret.
yes, let's get off Victoria's
Because
Secret.
we're getting people crazy here. We don't want to talk about pink and
Back to why
fake
I got
makeup.
into politics.
We got to talk about politics.
So my mom suggested that I go to work with an old family friend who's actually known me since I was born, Adam Clayton Powell IV, who at the time was a sitting assembly member for the 68th District in Northern Manhattan on the east side, and he was running for Congress against Charlie Rangel. So that was 2010. So I went to work with him and interned with him, volunteering, helping his campaign. And I had a real knack for it. And this is something that I never thought about. I never thought, oh, you know, I like politics, I like government, nothing like that. I wanted to go into law. And I had initially gone into that to improve my resume to get into law school. Never in a million years did I think I'd be pursuing this. So I worked with him in Congress. I had a really good knack for it. Helped a lot of people in terms of the volunteers, in terms of working with people who wanted to join the campaign, organizing media releases and everything else. I got so good at that, before you know it, he had me at every single one of his appearances. Wherever he went, he was calling me, you know, Dave, I need you here for this, I need you here for that. And I was with them all the way, every single day. I didn't have a job at the time. So he lost that race, as you know. He lost by a 25% margin. And after he lost, he was still an assembly member. He couldn't run for re-election in the assembly. So he said, listen, why don't you work in my office for the remaining months that I have until December 31st when I have to give it up? I think you'd be a great asset. And even though we only have a little bit of time, there's still so many services we could provide to the people of Northern Manhattan. So I said, without a doubt. So I joined his office as his community liaison. And to this day, he tells me there are still people who ask about me when he sees him in the street.
I miss you.
And miss me because I really, you know, I'm passionate about what I do. And when I do something, my dad always told me, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. If not, don't do it at all.
Right.
So that's the attitude that I took to it. And so we helped a lot of elderly people get out of apartments that they were in fear of their lives. For example, there was some NYCHA housing projects there that unfortunately did not have the best security. There were elderly people there that when they complained that their neighbors were being noisy, they would threaten them. So we helped them relocate and not be too far away from their families. We help people with things like power of attorney, about getting Medicaid benefits, dealing with welfare and everything else like that, and ensuring that everyone got the services that they needed, that at least that we could help them with, of course. We help people find apartments. We help people find jobs. People would come in and they would use our computers, our fax machines. I even taught people
What district
resumes.
was this that he had?
District 68.
68, so that's Lower
68.
Manhattan?
All Northern Manhattan, the east side mostly, El Barrio. Right.
And that's where you basically started.
That's where I
We
basically
started
got my
working with the
start.
community.
Working with the community. Very different community than what we have
Absolutely.
in Queens. Very different, but a lot of issues.
Was it
They
like a
have-
more upscale?
No, I mean, I don't know if you'd really, I mean, I guess, you know, if you're comparing in terms of housing projects, I
Right.
guess you could say that Queens, in that respect, the neighborhood that I'm in right now, I guess you could say is more upscale, but I really look at it as just different groups of people.
Right.
It's
a good way of putting it.
Definitely different set of people.
Right.
A lot of issues that we had to deal with. A lot of elderly that needed help finding housing, paying their rent off. As you know, when they get to a certain age, they're not working anymore, and they're depending on Social Security and disability checks. They have children that may try to take advantage of that and take their money. So we were helping them in that regard and ensuring that they got all the money they needed to pay their rent. And any other services that any of the people in the area needed. I mean, there were some people that came into the office that were just getting off a drug binge, for example, and needed help, needed to get into rehab, and needed someone to show them the way. And so we were there to help them. We were there to help them with applications for whatever it may be. I held resume workshops and helped people build resumes and teach them the wording that's really needed to have someone who's an employer look at it and say, okay, maybe I'll interview this person because, you know, that's something that's needed.
That's 100% right. in your community now that you're living in on District 38,
Yes.
you have a lot of things that you did for the community to put you where you are today.
I'd like to think so, sure.
So explain them to me and to our viewers what you did that these people are going to elect you to be our assembly.
Well, as you see, I have a pin on my lapel.
I see that.
So this pin is awarded to you when you win the Presidential Call to Service Award. The President's Office awards this to people who do 4,000 hours or more of volunteer service in their lifetime. I earned that award because, as I said, I have a passion for law. I really have a strong passion for it. And there are things in the law, unfortunately the law isn't written in a way that an average Joe, for example, can read it and understand it in its full entirety. You can read the law and it could say, you know, such and such evidence will be excluded if an illegal warrant, if a warrant is not issued and it's an illegal obtainment. But if you don't know the actual terms and what these terms mean, you'll never know what that sentence means. You'll just say, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this? But an attorney will. And even though I'm not an attorney, I studied things along the way to becoming one. And because I had such a passion, I went beyond my class to do that. So I learned a lot about legal terminology, and I helped a lot of people avoid things like bankruptcy. I had a friend actually whose parents were in a lot of debt. They had their mortgage, they were about to lose their house, and they were about to file for bankruptcy. So they didn't understand their options. So I explained to them their options, and I said, look, you know, you could do this, this, and this, and you can avoid this by going into debt consolidation. You could bring this loan over here and reconsolidate and get a lower percentage rate that you're paying, so that way you could pay it off in an easier or short, it might be a longer amount of time,
right,
but it'll be easier to pay off. So, you know, I helped them a lot with that. Also in criminal law, I mean, I have a lot of people who have young kids. The district is, there's a lot of youth in our district. And unfortunately, we don't have a community center where they can all go to and really engage in different programs. As you know, they were about to cut OST programs. The city council, the mayor wanted to cut them, funding to that. And we have a lack of after-school programs and really engaging activities for our youth. So what ends up happening is they go to the streets to hang out with their friends, and they get wrapped up in things that they may not necessarily have wanted to do. They may have been in a group where one person may have had something on them, some type of drug paraphernalia or a weapon. And now the police come, they search them all, they all get arrested, and they all go to jail. So what happens is now this person who didn't do any crime, it was just the only crime he did was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now let's say the person they were hanging out with has some type of drug paraphernalia on them. So now they will never, if they get convicted of that crime, they will never get an opportunity to pursue a higher education through financial aid. Did you know that in this country, if you get caught with the slightest bit of drug paraphernalia, you will never get federal financial aid, ever. But if you're a serial killer, you kill 15 people tomorrow, you get out of jail 30 years later, you can get financial aid. You can get a job, you can get a doctorate degree, the whole nine. So when I see these things happening, I realized that there was a major injustice in how our system works. So I said, you know what? I took it upon myself to share the knowledge that I had and make sure that when people get locked up and go before a judge, that the legal aid doesn't take advantage of them. As you know, the legal aids, most times they're voluntarily there, or they're getting paid a very small amount. So they're not really passionately, actively trying to help this person.